The Kaplan family reunion was already in full swing when I pulled into the sprawling lakeside estate in Oakridge Hills, exactly 45 minutes late, by design. At 31, I had learned from experience that punctuality only meant more time enduring sidelong glances and thinly veiled disappointment. These gatherings had always been showcases for the successful branches of our family tree. My older brother, my cousins, all decorated with prestigious degrees and corporate titles that made our parents beam with pride. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I adjusted the rearview mirror of my modest rental car, surrounded by a sea of luxury vehicles, German engineering and Italian design that screamed family money and corporate success. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed down my emerald silk blouse, paired with tailored black pants that I'd chosen carefully, understated, enough to avoid attention, but polished enough to deflect the usual comments about making an effort. The outfit had cost more than any of them would guess, but unlike my cousins, I didn't broadcast the designer labels. Just get through the next 4 hours, I whispered to myself. Smile, nod, and remember that they don't know. From the wraparound deck overlooking Cedar Lake, I could already hear the distinctive laugh of my mother, Rebecca Kaplan, socialite and self-appointed guardian of the family legacy. She'd be telling everyone about my brother Aaron's recent promotion at Meridian Capital, no doubt. I grabbed my phone and the sleek leather portfolio I'd brought, more out of habit than necessity. For a moment, I considered checking my messages. One last time, but decided against it. Whatever was happening at the office could wait a few hours. Today was about playing a role I'd perfected over the years. Sophia Kaplan, the underachiever, the disappointment, the one who never lived up to her potential. Sophia, you finally decided to join us, called my father, Gregory Kaplan, from the deck. His voice carried that familiar mixture of affection and disappointment that I'd grown up with. Everyone's been here since noon. I waved and offered my most practiced smile. Sorry, Dad. Had to wrap up some work calls. He shook his head slightly as I climbed the steps to the deck. Still with that little startup? The one with the odd name? Nebula Dynamics, I supplied. Yes, still there. What my father didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just with Nebula Dynamics. I had founded it 4 years ago, after walking away from a prestigious position at Atlas Group that my father had helped secure. They all thought I'd crashed and burned, taken a step down to work for some obscure tech company. In reality, I'd built a company now valued at $2.3 billion, operating under the radar through a complex structure of subsidiaries and silent partnerships. Your cousin Eliza just made partner at Blackwell & Pierce, my father mentioned, guiding me toward the gathering. Youngest female partner in the firm's history. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely happy for her. My issues weren't with my cousins. They were talented and hardworking. My frustration was with the narrow definition of success my family clung to. Prestigious firms, recognizable titles, traditional paths. As we reached the main patio area, my brother Aaron approached, champagne flute in hand, his custom-tailored suit a statement of his 7-figure salary. The prodigal daughter returns, he said with a half-smile. At 36, Aaron was the golden child, recently named CFO of Meridian Capital, one of the largest investment firms on the East Coast. We were just discussing the Weber acquisition, $1.2 billion deal closed yesterday. Congratulations, I said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. My cousin Eliza joined us, her engagement ring catching the afternoon sunlight. Sophia, Mom said you're still doing that tech support thing? I nearly choked on my champagne. Not exactly tech. Support. I'm in operations management. The deliberate understatement was second nature now. Well, if you ever want something more stable, I'm sure Aaron could put in a word at Meridian, she offered, exchanging knowing glances with my brother. They have a great associate program for people looking to redirect their careers. I smiled. Politely. I appreciate that. What they didn't know was that Nebula Dynamics had just finalized plans to acquire Meridian's largest competitor, Apex Financial, in a move that would reshape the entire industry. The paperwork had been signed yesterday, with the public announcement scheduled for Monday morning. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I excused myself and stepped away to check the message. Final approval from board members confirmed. Legal team. Has green-lit announcement prep. Congratulations, Ms. Kaplan. I tucked the phone away and took a slow sip of champagne, savoring the moment. In less than 48 hours, every financial news outlet in the country would be running the story, and the carefully constructed narrative my family had about me would unravel completely. Everything okay? My mother appeared beside me, eyeing my phone, suspiciously. You know, it's rude to be glued to your screen at family functions. Sorry, Mom. Just a quick work thing. I worry about you, Sophia, she said, lowering her voice. 31 and still drifting. When Aaron was your age, he was already on the executive track. I nodded, letting her words wash over me like they always did. The irony wasn't lost on me that while they thought I was struggling, I was overseeing a company with over 5,000 employees worldwide and an innovation pipeline that had even my competitors watching nervously. The reunion has just begun, I thought, as my mother steered me toward a group of relatives eager to share their accomplishments. And Sunday evening is going to change everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So, if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The gentle clink of crystal champagne flutes and practiced laughter floated across the lakeside terrace as I was shepherded toward the Success Circle, my private nickname for the cluster of Kaplan family achievers who inevitably formed at every reunion. Uncle Richard, the patriarch of the Boston Kaplans, holding court with his trademark bourbon in hand, spotted me first. Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence, he called out, his voice carrying that particular tone reserved for family members who'd chosen unconventional paths. Our little tech girl, I offered a practiced smile, the kind that reached my lips but carefully avoided my eyes. Good to see you too, Uncle Richard. Still working for that. What's it called again? Nebula something? He waved his hand dismissively, not bothering to wait for my correction. Nebula Dynamics, I supplied, accepting the inevitable. Yes, still there. Cousin Marcus, Aaron's fraternity brother turned brother-in-law, chimed in with exaggerated interest. What exactly do they do again, Sophia? Some kind of app development? His tone suggested he was speaking to a child about a hobby rather than a professional about their career. Before I could respond, my Aunt Patricia leaned in, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the afternoon light. It's one of those startups, she stage whispered, as though explaining something vaguely embarrassing. They come and go so quickly these days. I took a deliberate sip of champagne, swallowing my instinctive response along with the expensive bubbles. What they didn't know was that Nebula Dynamics had revolutionized supply chain logistics through our proprietary AI system, reducing costs by an average of 43% for our clients while increasing efficiency by nearly 60%. Our technology was currently being used by 17 Fortune 100 companies under white-label agreements that kept our name out of the headlines, exactly as I'd planned. It's going well, I said simply. We're growing. Aaron arrived with his wife Vanessa, both immaculately dressed in complimentary navy blue outfits that screamed, power couple. My brother's hand landed heavily on my shoulder. Speaking of growing, he said, smoothly redirecting the conversation, Meridian just announced our expansion into Asian markets. Dad's on the board, of course, so he's been part of the strategy sessions. He turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. We're projecting a first-year penetration that will boost our portfolio by at least $2 billion. What Aaron didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Nebula had already established partnerships with 3 of the largest financial technology providers across Singapore, Japan, and South Korea. Meridian's expansion would hit a wall of competition they never saw coming, especially after our acquisition announcement on Monday. "That sounds ambitious," I said carefully. My father joined our circle, placing a proprietary arm around Aaron's shoulders. "Ambitious but achievable. That's the Kaplan way, at least for most of us." He glanced at me briefly, a flash of disappointment crossing his features before he masked it with a smile. "Some of us just need more time to find our footing." I felt the familiar burn of indignation rise in my chest but tamped it down. Sunday evening was less than 48 hours away. Patience had gotten me this far. I could manage 2 more days. "Sophia, darling," my mother called, gesturing me toward a tall, distinguished-looking man in his early 40s. "Come meet Lawrence Bennett. He's just made partner at Stratton and Hughes." I recognized the setup immediately, another eligible bachelor with the right credentials and family connections. My mother's ongoing project to save me from my apparent career failures by securing a financially advantageous marriage hadn't waned despite my repeated objections. "Lawrence is looking for someone to run his foundation's social media," my mother added with a meaningful look as I approached. "I mentioned you're good with computers." I extended my hand professionally, ignoring the matchmaking attempt. "Sophia Kaplan, pleasure to meet you." Lawrence's handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "Your mother speaks highly of your technical abilities." The slight pause spoke volumes. "We're looking for someone to manage our online presence. Nothing too complicated. Posting updates about charity events, keeping the website current. Perfect for someone looking to build experience." I bit back the information that Nebula's social media strategy, which I'd personally overseen, had resulted in engagement metrics that had become a case study at 2 leading business schools. Instead, I nodded politely. "How thoughtful of you to consider me." "Lawrence just donated an entire wing to the Children's Hospital," my mother interjected, her voice bright with artificial enthusiasm. "The Bennett Pediatric Research Center." "Very impressive," I said, genuinely meaning it. "Which research areas are you focusing on?" Lawrence looked momentarily caught off guard by a substantive question. "Well, various and pediatric issues. My assistant handles the specifics. The important thing is the visibility it brings to important causes." Translation: he'd written a check for the naming rights with minimal involvement in the actual mission. I'd spent 6 months researching pediatric cancer treatment protocols before Nebula anonymously funded a $50 million research initiative at Johns Hopkins last year, but that wasn't information I shared at family gatherings. Sophia used to have such promise, my mother said to Lawrence in a stage whisper that was clearly meant for me to hear. National Merit Scholar, graduated summa cum laude from Wharton. Then she just gave up on the corporate track. Such a shame. I excused myself to refresh my drink, needing a moment of space. At the bar setup, I ran into my cousin Eliza's husband, James, the only family member who'd ever shown genuine interest in what I actually did. "Surviving so far?" he asked with a knowing smile. "Barely," I admitted. 1 hour down, 3 to go. James lowered his voice. "I read an interesting analysis about supply chain AI innovations last week. Mentioned a company disrupting the entire industry with some revolutionary protocol. Wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" I kept my expression neutral, though I suspected James had pieced together more than the rest of the family. The article had carefully avoided naming Nebula, referring only to our subsidiary, Next Gen Logistics. "There's a lot happening in that space," I said noncommittally. James nodded, his eyes twinkling. "I bet there is. Well, whoever's behind. It is probably making your brother's team at Meridian very nervous, whether they know it yet or not." Before I could respond, Aunt Patricia called James over to discuss some family trust matter. He gave me a subtle wink before departing, leaving me to wonder exactly how much he'd figured out. My phone vibrated again, Another message from my executive, Assistant Harper. Legal team needs approval on press packet final draft. Critical path for Sunday release. Also, Tokyo team confirmed for 8 p.m. call tonight. I glanced at my watch. The Tokyo call would mean slipping away from the reunion dinner early, which, frankly, wasn't the worst scenario. I texted back a quick confirmation as my father approached. Important business? He asked, eyebrow raised skeptically. Just coordinating. Some work details, I replied, tucking my phone away. Sophia, he began, his tone shifting into the familiar lecture mode I'd endured since childhood. I've been patient with this detour of yours. We all have. But you're 31 now. It's time to think seriously about your future. I am thinking about my future, Dad. Are you? Because from where I stand, you walked away from a promising career at Atlas to join some unknown startup with no pedigree, no proven track record. That's not building a future. That's hiding from real responsibility. The irony of his words nearly made me laugh aloud. The real responsibility he couldn't see included quarterly board meetings where I made decisions affecting thousands of employees, strategic partnerships I'd negotiated across 3 continents, and innovation pipelines that would transform entire industries. Sometimes the most promising opportunities don't come with recognizable names attached, I said carefully. Opportunities? He sighed, the disappointment evident in his eyes. Aaron is overseeing billions in assets. Eliza just made partner at one of the most prestigious firms in the country. And you're, what, middle management at a company no one's ever heard of? I took a deep breath. I'm exactly where I need to be, Dad. He patted my shoulder condescendingly. I hope you'll reconsider Lawrence's offer. It could be a good stepping stone back to a real career path. Your mother and I just want to see you succeed. As he walked away, I allowed myself a small, private smile. They had always defined success in such limited terms. Titles it recognized. Companies, marriages to the right people, properties in the right neighborhoods. They had no concept of creating something from nothing, of seeing a gap in the market that no one else noticed and building a solution that changed everything. Sunday evening couldn't come soon enough. I slipped away from the main gathering to the quieter eastern terrace, needing a moment to compose myself. The setting sun cast long shadows across Cedar Lake, painting the water in shades of amber and gold. The view was spectacular, one of the reasons the Oakridge Hills estate had become our traditional reunion venue after grandfather Kaplan purchased it 12 years ago. The property was a testament to old money and influence, 2 things the Kaplans valued above almost everything else. What no one in my family knew, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was the truth about nebula dynamics. 4 years ago, after walking away from the dream job at Atlas Group that my father had orchestrated for me, I'd taken my savings and a small inheritance from my grandmother and founded what began as a modest logistics consulting firm. My time at Atlas had shown me critical inefficiencies in global supply chain management that the established players were too entrenched to address. Where they saw obstacles, I saw opportunity. The first year was brutal, working from a converted storage unit, sleeping on a futon in my small apartment, and pouring every cent into developing our proprietary algorithm. My parents had been horrified when I left Atlas, even more so when I declined their offers to help me get back on track. They interpreted my secrecy as embarrassment rather than strategy. By year 2, Nebula had secured our first major client, a mid-sized retailer desperate to compete with the e-commerce giants. Our system cut their logistics costs by 58% within 6 months. Word spread quietly through the industry, exactly as I'd planned. We operated behind white-label agreements and non-disclosure contracts, providing revolutionary solutions while deliberately maintaining a low profile. Now, in year 4, Nebula Dynamics employed over 5,000 people across 4 continents. Our technology powered the supply chains of 17 Fortune 100 companies. Our valuation had hit $2.3 billion after our last private funding round, and tomorrow evening, we would announce our acquisition of Apex Financial, one of the largest financial services platforms in the country and Meridian Capital's chief competitor. I had built an empire in silence while my family believed I was struggling. "Hiding out here won't save you from Aunt Catherine's interrogation about your love life," came a familiar voice, breaking into my thoughts. I turned to see my cousin Diana approaching with 2 fresh glasses of champagne. At 29, Diana was the black sheep of the Connecticut branch of Kaplan's, the only one who had chosen a career in public service rather than finance or law. She worked as a public defender in Brooklyn, earning a fraction of what the rest of the family considered acceptable income. "I figured you could use this," she said, handing me one of the glasses. "I saw Uncle Greg giving you the wasted potential talk." I smiled gratefully. "Am I that transparent?" "No, but the lecture is. I got the female version last Christmas, all about how I'm not getting any younger and how challenging careers make it hard to prioritize family." She rolled her eyes. Diana was perhaps the only family member I'd considered bringing into my confidence over the years. Her integrity and independence had always impressed me, but operational security had been paramount to Nebula's success, and I'd maintained strict separation between my personal and professional lives. "How's the public defender's office?" I asked, genuinely interested. Her eyes lit up. "Overwhelming, underfunded, and absolutely essential. I just won a case last week for a kid who would have been railroaded by the system otherwise." She hesitated. "It doesn't come with a corner office or country club membership, but I sleep well at night." "That's worth more than most people realize," I said quietly. Diana studied me curiously. "You know, for someone the family considers a disappointment, you seem remarkably centered. Most people would be defensive after enduring what you do at these gatherings." I shrugged. "Perspective changes things." "Does your perspective have anything to do with that mystery portfolio you've been carrying all day? The one you haven't let out of your sight?" She nodded toward the leather folio tucked under my arm. "Just some work documents," I said casually. The portfolio actually contained the final acquisition details for Apex Financial, paperwork I'd been reviewing before driving to the reunion. Bringing it had been unnecessary, perhaps even risky, but something in me had wanted physical proof of my accomplishments nearby while enduring my family's condescension. "Must be important work," Diana observed. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. I checked the message discreetly. "PR team needs final approval on press release language. Also, Apex executive team requesting private briefing before public announcement. Critical time-sensitive decisions needed." I sighed. The Tokyo call at 8 p.m. was already going to require me to miss part of the family dinner. Now it seemed I'd need to step away even sooner to handle these pressing matters. "Everything okay?" Diana asked. "Just work," I said, tucking my phone away. "I might need to step out later to handle a few things." "On a Saturday? At a family reunion?" She raised an eyebrow. "Even Aaron isn't taking calls today, and he sleeps with his phone." I offered a non-committal smile. "Different kind of work." Diana looked like she might press further, but we were interrupted by the arrival of my mother and Aunt Catherine. "There you are, Sophia," my mother said, a hint of irritation in her voice. "Lawrence was asking about you. It's rude to disappear when people are making an effort to get to know you." "Sorry, Mom. Just needed some fresh air." Aunt Catherine, my mother's younger sister and the family's most notorious gossip, gave me an appraising look. "Lawrence is quite the catch, Sophia. Senior partner, sits on 3 corporate boards, and that waterfront property in the Hamptons." She sighed dramatically. "Some women would be falling over themselves for that introduction." "I'm sure they would," I replied diplomatically. "Your mother tells me you're still with that small tech company," Aunt Catherine continued. "What exactly? Is your title there, dear? Something in administration?" Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. "Sophia has always been modest about her position. She handles operational things." The vague description hung in the air, her attempt to make my job sound more impressive than she believed it to be. If they only knew that operational things included restructuring entire global logistics systems and developing artificial intelligence, protocols that had revolutionized inventory management across multiple industries. If they knew that my actual title was founder and chief executive officer. Well, we all have to start somewhere, Aunt Catherine said with practiced sympathy. Though I would have thought after, what has it been now, 4 years, you might have advanced to something more substantial. I took a slow sip of champagne, buying time to compose a measured response. I find the work fulfilling. Fulfilling doesn't pay for retirement, dear, she replied. Diana caught my eye and gave me a subtle eye roll behind our aunt's back. Speaking of substantial positions, my mother interjected, clearly eager to change the subject. Did you hear that Aaron is being considered for the Meridian Board next year? At 36, the youngest board member in company history. We were just discussing that at lunch, Aunt Catherine gushed. Gregory must be so proud, following right in his footsteps. My father had served on the Meridian Board for nearly a decade, a position secured through the old boy network he'd cultivated since his Harvard days. The irony that both Meridian and my father were about to be blindsided by my company's acquisition of their main competitor wasn't lost on me. Aaron has always been focused, my mother continued, with a meaningful glance in my direction. He understood the value of traditional career paths. I swallowed the urge to point out that traditional wasn't synonymous with successful, and that innovation rarely came from following established playbooks. Instead, I nodded politely. Diana. Aunt Catherine turned her attention to my cousin, clearly considering us both projects in need of career intervention. Your mother mentioned you're still with the public defender's office. Have you considered private practice? Your cousin William's firm is always looking for sharp legal minds, and the compensation package is quite impressive. Diana's smile remained fixed, though I noticed her knuckles whitening around her champagne glass. I'm exactly where I want to be, Aunt Catherine. Such idealism, she sighed, as if diagnosing a regrettable condition. Well, I suppose someone has to help those people. My phone vibrated again. A text from Harper. Development team needs immediate decision on Apex integration timeline. Technical director awaiting your call. I glanced at my watch. The family dinner would be starting in less than an hour, and I still needed to handle multiple critical decisions before the Tokyo call at 8. If you'll excuse me, I said, I need to make a quick call. My mother's expression tightened with disapproval. Sophia? Dinner is being served in 45 minutes. Surely whatever it is can wait until tomorrow. It really can't, Mom. I'm sorry. I stepped away before she could object further, heading toward a quiet spot near the boathouse where I could take the calls without interruption. As I walked away, I heard Aunt Catherine's stage whisper, Rebecca, you really should talk to her about priorities. Family events should come before some administrative job at a company no one's ever heard of. I smiled to myself as I dialed Harper's number. If only they knew that the administrative job involved making decisions that would reshape an entire industry and send shockwaves through the financial world, including my brother's precious Meridian capital, in less than 24 hours. Harper, I said when my assistant answered. Let's start with the Apex integration timeline, then move to the press release approval. I need everything finalized before the Tokyo call at 8. The familiar rhythm of executive decision-making centered me, washing away the residual frustration from my family's condescension. In this world, my real world, I wasn't the disappointing daughter or the underachieving cousin. I was Sophia Kaplan, CEO of Nebula Dynamics, the woman who had built a multi-billion-dollar company from nothing while the world wasn't watching. And, after tomorrow, everyone would be watching. I returned from my series of calls just as the dinner bell chimed across the estate grounds, summoning the Kaplans to the grand dining pavilion overlooking the lake. Twilight had settled over Oakridge Hills, and the pavilion glowed with strategically placed lighting that highlighted the estate's architectural details while flattering the guests' features, another of my mother's careful considerations. "There you are," my father said as I slipped into my assigned seat at the long mahogany table. "Your mother was about to send out a search party." "Sorry," I said, placing my phone face down beside my plate. "Work emergency." My father's expression conveyed his opinion of what constituted a legitimate work emergency at a company like Nebula Dynamics. "Well, you're here now. Lawrence saved you a seat." He nodded toward the empty chair beside the would-be suitor my mother had selected. Lawrence Bennett offered a practiced smile as I took my seat. "I was beginning to think you'd escaped," he said in a tone that suggested he found the idea charming rather than offensive. "Just handling some business," I replied, unfolding my napkin and placing it in my lap. Across the table, Aaron raised an eyebrow. "On a Saturday evening? What kind of emergency happens at a tech support company over the weekend?" Before I could correct his deliberate mischaracterization of Nebula, my mother interjected from her position at the opposite end of the table. "Let's not discuss business at dinner. This is family time." The irony wasn't lost on me, considering that family gatherings inevitably revolved around celebrating business successes, as long as they were the right kind of successes. Waitstaff began serving the first course, a chilled lobster bisque that had been a Kaplan reunion tradition since my grandfather's time. Conversation flowed around me. Property acquisitions in the Hamptons, upcoming charity galas, Aaron's daughter's acceptance into exclusive private schools. I nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals, my mind still processing the calls I'd just completed. The Apex acquisition was officially set. Our legal team had resolved the final contractual details, and the press package was ready for distribution to major financial outlets tomorrow evening at precisely 7 p.m. Eastern. The Tokyo team had confirmed their readiness for the market response in Asian trading. Everything was aligned for what would be the biggest move in Nebula's history, and a complete surprise to the financial world, including my brother's precious Meridian capital. "Sophia," Lawrence's voice pulled me back to the present. "Your mother mentioned you studied at Wharton. Finance, was it?" "Double major," I replied. "Finance and computer science." "Interesting combination," he said with what seemed like genuine curiosity. "What drew you to that particular pairing?" I considered my answer carefully. I've always been interested in the intersection of financial systems and technology, how innovations in one sphere can transform the other. "That explains your current position, I suppose," he said diplomatically. Aaron chuckled from across the table. Though not why she walked away from Atlas Group after Dad pulled every string imaginable to get her in. They fast-tracked her for management, and 6 months later she was gone. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. The Atlas situation remained a sore point. His personal and professional connections had been leveraged to secure me the position, and my departure had reflected poorly on him in his social circles. "Sometimes the traditional path isn't the right one," I said evenly. "Traditional paths become traditional because they work," my father responded. "Atlas would have given you the foundation and connections to build a real career." I took a slow sip of the white wine that had been paired with our first course. "I've built exactly the career I wanted." A skeptical silence fell over our section of the table. Lawrence, apparently sensing the tension, attempted to redirect the conversation. "I understand you grew up in Greenwich?" he said. "Beautiful area. I've been looking at properties there myself." While Lawrence launched into a detailed description of his real estate aspirations, I felt my phone vibrate against the table. I discreetly checked the screen to see a message from Harper. "Ms. Kaplan, Tokyo team needs you on the call early. Market indicators shifting. Critical strategy adjustments required before announcement." I glanced at my watch. 7:35 p.m. I'd need to leave in 15 minutes to make the adjusted call time, which meant missing most of the dinner. As if reading my thoughts, my mother caught my eye from the head of the table, her expression clearly communicating that leaving dinner early would be unacceptable. Family obligations in her world always superseded work commitments, especially work at companies she deemed insignificant. I sent a quick text back to Harper. "We'll be on at 7:50. Prepare preliminary options." Lawrence was still detailing the waterfront property he was considering when Aunt Patricia's voice cut across the table. "So, Sophia, Rebecca tells me you're still single. At 31. In my day, we would have considered that practically a spinster." Several family members chuckled, while Diana shot me a sympathetic glance from further down the table. "I've been focused on other priorities," I said diplomatically. "Career is important," Aunt Patricia conceded. "But family is everything. Look at Aaron and Vanessa, successful careers and 3 beautiful children." "Not everyone's journey looks the same," I replied, maintaining my composure. "Of course not, dear," she said with false sympathy. "We all move at different paces." Uncle Richard, never one to miss an opportunity to offer unsolicited advice, leaned forward. "The problem with your generation, Sophia, is this notion that you can have it all. Sometimes you need to make choices, prioritize." "I've made my choices," I said simply. "They're just different from what you might have expected." My phone vibrated again. Another message from Harper. "Urgent. Tokyo markets opening with unexpected volatility. Strategy call, cannot wait." I knew what I had to do, despite the social cost. As the main course was being served, herb-crusted rack of lamb with seasonal vegetables, I carefully placed my napkin beside my plate and stood. "I apologize, but I need to step out for an important call," I announced, primarily to my mother, whose expression had already hardened in disapproval. "I'll try to be quick." "Sophia," my father said with quiet intensity, "we are in the middle of a family dinner. I understand, and I'm sorry. This can't wait." Aaron scoffed audibly. "What could possibly be so important at your company that it can't wait an hour?" The condescension in his voice crystallized something in me. A moment of clarity amid the familiar fog of family expectations. For years, I'd absorbed their dismissive comments and downplayed my achievements, partly from strategic necessity and partly from a lingering desire for their approval. But in that moment, with billions of dollars and thousands of careers hanging, in the balance of decisions I needed to make, their narrow understanding of success seemed almost pitiful. "International market movements wait for no one," I said simply, turning to leave. "Market movements?" Aaron laughed. "You provide IT support for e-commerce companies. What do you know about international markets?" I paused, considering a more direct response, but decided against it. In less than 24 hours, he would understand exactly how much I knew about markets. "I'll be back as soon as I can," I said instead. As I walked away, I heard my mother's embarrassed explanation to the table. "She's always been so independent, even as a child." I made my way to the guest suite I'd been assigned for the weekend, closed the door, and took a deep breath before dialing into the conference call. Harper answered immediately. "Ms. Kaplan, thank you for joining early. The Tokyo team is standing by, and we have the New York analysts on the line as well." "What are we looking at, Harper?" I asked, switching instantly into CEO mode. "Initial market indicators in Asia suggest our announcement timing may need adjustment. The volatility could either amplify our impact or dilute it, depending on how we position." "Put the team on," I directed, settling into the armchair by the window overlooking the darkened lake. For the next 45 minutes, I led a strategic discussion with executives across 3 continents, analyzing market patterns, adjusting messaging, and finalizing timing decisions that would optimize the impact of tomorrow's announcement. We decided to maintain our original timeline but adjusted key elements of our communication strategy to account for the market conditions. As the call concluded, I felt the familiar rush of executive decision-making, the clarity of purpose, the weight of responsibility, and the satisfaction of navigating complex variables toward a definitive outcome. This world, not the performance of family expectations downstairs, was my natural element. "Excellent work, everyone," I said to the team. "Harper, finalize the adjustments and distribute to all departments. I want confirmation of readiness from every team lead by midnight Eastern." "Yes, Ms. Kaplan," Harper responded with the efficiency that had made her invaluable to Nebula's operations. "Will you be available if additional issues arise?" I glanced at my watch, 8:45 p.m. The family dinner would be nearing its conclusion, likely transitioning to drinks and dessert on the main terrace. "I'll be back online at 10, I said. "Text me if anything critical comes up before then." As I ended the call, a soft knock sounded at my door. I opened it to find Diana standing in the hallway, holding 2 dessert plates. "Thought you might want this," she said, offering me a slice of chocolate torte. "Aunt Rebecca is telling everyone you had a migraine to cover for your absence." I accepted the plate gratefully. "Thank you, both for the dessert and the intelligence." Diana leaned against the doorframe, studying me with curious eyes. "You know, for someone supposedly handling a minor work emergency at an obscure tech company, you look remarkably authoritative right now." I realized I was still carrying myself with the executive presence that came naturally during business operations. Straight posture, focused expression, decisive movements. I consciously relaxed my shoulders. "Force of habit," I said lightly. She murmured, clearly unconvinced. "You were on that call for almost an hour." "Complicated situation," I offered vaguely. Diana took a bite of her own dessert, watching me thoughtfully. "You know what I've always wondered? Why someone who graduated top of her class from Wharton, who had every advantage and connection, would walk away from a prestigious position to join a company no one's ever heard of." She paused. "Unless, of course, there's more to the story." I considered my cousin carefully. Of all the Kaplans, Diana was the most perceptive and the least invested in family mythology. Her choice to become a public defender rather than joining a corporate law firm had already marked her as something of an outlier. "There's always more to the story," I said finally. "I thought so," she replied with a small smile. "Well, whatever you're really doing, it seems to agree with you. You have this confidence that's new. I like it." Before I could respond, we heard footsteps approaching, the distinctive click of my mother's heels on marble flooring. "You should probably prepare for an interrogation about your mysterious migraine," Diana said quietly. "I'll run interference if I can." "Thanks," I said, genuinely appreciative of the alliance. As Diana slipped away, I took a deep breath and prepared to rejoin the family gathering. Less than 24 hours remained until the announcement that would change everything: my relationship with my family, Nebula's public profile, and the landscape of an entire industry. One more evening of being underestimated. I could manage that. The next morning dawned clear and bright over Cedar Lake, sunlight dappling through the oak trees that gave the estate its name. I'd slept fitfully, waking several times to check updates from the global teams preparing for the evening's announcement. By 6 a.m., I gave up on further rest and slipped out onto my private balcony with a cup of coffee, laptop open to review the final press materials. The Apex acquisition would become public at precisely 7 p.m. Eastern, just hours from now. Financial analysts would scramble to understand the implications. News outlets would race to profile the previously unknown Nebula dynamics, and my brother's company, Meridian Capital, would face serious questions about their market position and expansion strategy. By tomorrow morning, my family would see me very differently. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. I closed my laptop and found my mother standing in the hallway, already dressed in pressed linen pants and a cashmere sweater, despite the early hour. "You're up early," she said, surprise evident in her voice. How's your head? It took me a moment to remember Diana's cover story about a migraine. Much better, thanks. Good. I was hoping to catch you before breakfast. She stepped into the room without waiting for an invitation, her gaze sweeping critically over my simple t-shirt and yoga pants. The Harrington Smythe family is joining us for brunch on the main terrace at 11. Their son Bradford is visiting from London. Oxford educated, working in international finance. I suppressed a sigh, recognizing another of her matchmaking attempts. Mom, I appreciate the thought, but I'm not interested in being set up. It's not a setup, Sophia, she insisted. It's networking. Bradford works for Wellington Partners. They manage over $40 billion in assets. These are the kinds of connections that could help you progress. The irony nearly made me laugh. Nebula Dynamics had recently declined an investment opportunity with Wellington Partners, finding their approach too conservative for our growth strategy. My mother would be horrified to learn I'd turned down the very connection she thought could save my career. I already have all the career connections I need, I said carefully. She sat on the edge of my perfectly made bed, her expression shifting to one of practiced concern. Darling, your father and I have been patient. We understand that leaving Atlas was important to you for some reason, but it's been 4 years. This experiment has gone on long enough. It's not an experiment, Mom. It's my career. A career should build towards something, Sophia. What exactly are you building at? This Nebula place? Do you even have people reporting to you yet? 5,000 employees across 4 continents, including a C-suite of executives recruited from some of the most prestigious firms in the world. But I simply said, yes, I have a team. She sighed, the sound heavy with disappointment. Your brother was managing a department of 30 people by your age, with a corner office and a clear path to the executive floor. Different companies have different structures, I said neutrally. Sophia. She reached for my hand, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the morning light. I'm worried about you. Everyone is. You're 31 years old with no significant professional achievements, no serious relationship prospects, not even a property investment. What is your plan? The question, asked with such genuine concern, almost broke my composure. My mother truly believed I was floundering, that my life lacked direction and substance. The vast gulf between her perception and the reality of my daily existence as a CEO leading a multi-billion-dollar company was almost surreal. I have a plan, Mom, I said quietly. It's just not the plan you expected. She patted my hand in a gesture that managed to be both affectionate and dismissive. Well, I hope it includes brunch. The Harrington Smythes will be disappointed if you're not there. She stood to leave, pausing at the door. Wear the blue dress I bought you for your birthday. It's much more flattering than what you brought. After she left, I returned to the balcony and my now cooling coffee. My phone vibrated with a text from Harper. Final media distribution list approved. Legal has cleared all documentation. Social, media response team in place. Everything on schedule for 7 p.m. announcement. I sent back a quick acknowledgement, then opened my email to find a message from our chief financial officer with the subject line, Financial World about to be shocked. It contained the final valuation numbers for the Apex deal and projected market impact analysis. Conservative estimates suggested Meridian Capital would see an immediate 15 to 18% drop in share value once the markets absorbed our announcement. Aaron's golden boy status at Meridian was about to face its first serious challenge. The thought didn't bring me the satisfaction some might expect. Despite our complicated relationship, he was still my brother. But he had made his choices, aligning himself with traditional power structures and looking down on innovative approaches, including mine. My phone rang, Diana calling. I answered to hear restaurant noise in the background. Please tell me you're escaping the estate for a bit, she said without preamble. I'm at the Lakeside Cafe in town, and I'm offering you sanctuary from Aunt Rebecca's matchmaking brunch. laughed. How did you know about that? I overheard her telling Aunt Catherine about the eligible Oxford man who's joining us today. Apparently, he manages sovereign wealth funds or something equally impressive to the Kaplan scorecard. I glanced at my watch. The brunch wasn't for several hours, and I did have some time before my next scheduled call. A brief escape sounded perfect. Give me 20 minutes, I decided. I quickly showered and dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, pointedly, ignoring the blue dress my mother had mentioned, and slipped out of the house. Most of the family was still asleep or just beginning to stir, making it easy to avoid conversations as I made my way to my rental car. The Lakeside Cafe sat on the town's main street, a charming converted Victorian with a wraparound porch overlooking the water. Diana waved from a corner table, 2 coffee mugs already waiting. You look suspiciously well-rested for someone who had a debilitating migraine last night, she observed as I sat down. Miraculous recovery, I replied, gratefully accepting the coffee she pushed toward me. Just in time to avoid Bradford Harrington Smythe, she said with a knowing smile. What a coincidence. You're my favorite cousin, you know that? I know. It's because I'm the only one who doesn't care what the rest of them think. She took a sip of her coffee, studying me over the rim. So, are you going to tell me what's really going on with you? I hesitated. What do you mean? Oh, come on, Sophia. The mysterious work calls that pull you away from family dinner. The executive vibe you give off when you think no one's watching. That portfolio you guard like it contains state secrets. She leaned forward. You're not just working at some random tech company, are you? For a moment, I considered telling her. Everything. Diana was trustworthy and insightful, qualities rare in our family, but years of carefully protecting Nebula's strategy had made discretion second nature. Let's just say there's more to my career than most of the family assumes, I offered. She nodded slowly. I figured as much. You were always the strategic one, even as a kid. Remember when you created that elaborate system to track which relatives gave the best birthday gifts? I laughed at the memory. Color-coded spreadsheets at age 9 should have been a warning sign. It was, Diana confirmed. Everyone else just missed it. She paused, selecting her words carefully. Whatever you're doing, it seems to be working for you. You have this inner confidence that wasn't there a few years ago. Thank you for noticing, I said sincerely. The rest of them will catch up. Eventually, she assured me. Though, knowing our family, they'll probably claim they always believed in you once they realize you're successful. We'll see, I said, thinking of the coming evening's announcement. We spent the next hour in easy conversation, deliberately avoiding family drama in favor of discussing books we'd read, trips we'd taken, and Diana's more interesting legal cases. It was refreshing to interact with a family member who didn't measure every life choice against the Kaplan success metric. As we were finishing our second round of coffee, my phone buzzed with a calendar alert. I had a strategy call with the executive team in 30 minutes to review final preparations for the announcement. Duty calls? Diana guessed, noticing my expression. Unfortunately, yes. I reached for my wallet, but she waved me off. I've got this. Consider it payment for the entertainment I'll get watching Aunt Rebecca try to force you and Bradford together at brunch. I grimaced. About that? I might not make it back in time. Work emergency? She asked, her tone suggesting she didn't quite believe it but didn't judge me for the excuse either. Something like that, I admitted. She studied me for a moment. Whatever's happening with this mysterious job of yours, I hope it's worth all the family drama. It is, I said with absolute certainty. And Diana, you might want to keep your evening free. There's something I'd like to discuss with you later. Her eyebrows rose in curiosity. Now you've got me intrigued. Should I be worried? Not at all, I assured her. Just open to possibilities. We parted outside the cafe, and I drove toward the outskirts of town where I could take my call without interruption. Finding a quiet spot overlooking the lake, I dialed into the conference line exactly on schedule. "Good morning, Ms. Kaplan," Harper greeted me. "The executive team is assembled and waiting." "Thank you, Harper. Let's begin." For the next 45 minutes, I led my leadership team through final preparations for the Apex announcement. Our chief marketing officer confirmed media strategy, our legal counsel reviewed potential regulatory questions, and our chief technology officer outlined the integration roadmap we would present to investors. "And the Meridian situation?" I asked our chief strategy officer. "Our analysis indicates they'll be caught completely off guard," he confirmed. "Their Asia expansion strategy relied heavily on partnerships that will now fall under our influence through the Apex acquisition. Their stock will take an immediate hit, but the longer-term implications are even more significant." I thought of Aaron, of his pride in the expansion strategy he'd helped develop. "Make sure our public messaging focuses on the positive aspects of our growth, not on competitors' vulnerabilities," I directed. "We're building something, not tearing others down." As the call concluded, I noticed several missed texts from my mother, increasingly urgent in tone. "Where are you? The Harrington Smythes arrive in an hour." "Sophia, please call me immediately. Your absence is embarrassing the family. Bradford specifically asked to meet you." I sighed and texted back a simple response. "Unavoidable work situation. Send my regrets." Her reply came almost instantly. "This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior that concerns your father and me. We'll discuss this later." I put my phone away and started the drive back to Oakridge Hills. In just a few hours, my irresponsible behavior would make headlines across the financial world. The thought brought not vindication but a strange sense of relief. After years of operating in the shadows, of being underestimated and dismissed, the truth about nebula dynamics, and about me, would finally be known. The weight of family expectations had been heavy, but the weight of secrecy had been heavier still. By tonight, at least one of those burdens would be lifted. I returned to the Oakridge Hills estate just after 2 p.m. to find the aftermath of the Harrington Smythe, brunch still lingering on the main terrace. A few relatives remained, including my father and Uncle Richard, deep in conversation over brandy despite the early hour. My mother was nowhere to be seen, which was probably for the best, given her last text message. I slipped in through a side entrance, hoping to reach my room unnoticed, but Erin intercepted me in the main hallway. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," he said, leaning against the doorframe of the library. His tone was light, but I detected the underlying criticism. Bradford Harrington Smythe was quite disappointed. Oxford education, managing director at Wellington by 34, family estate in the Cotswolds, exactly the kind of connection you could use. "I had work obligations," I said simply. "On a Sunday?" He raised an eyebrow. "What could possibly be so urgent at—" He paused dramatically. "Nebula dynamics?" The condescension in his voice was nothing new, but today it grated more than usual. In less than 5 hours, his perception of my career would be irreversibly altered. "You'd be surprised," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Enlighten me," he challenged, following me as I attempted to move past him toward the stairs. What critical emergency required the attention of a mid-level employee at an obscure tech company on a Sunday afternoon during a family gathering? I stopped and turned to face him. "Aaron, I appreciate that you're concerned, but my work is my business." "It becomes family business when you embarrass Mom in front of her social circle," he countered. "The Harrington Smythes are exactly the kind of connection this family cultivates. Dad's already irritated about your behavior at dinner last night, and now this." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that in a few hours, none of this would matter. "I'll apologize to Mom." "That's not the point, Sophia," he said, his voice taking on the lecturing tone he'd perfected over the years. The point is that you continue to make choices that undermine your potential. You had every advantage. The right schools, the right connections, the right introduction to Atlas, and you've squandered it all for what? Some temporary role at a company no one's heard of? 4 years ago, his words might have stung. Now, they seemed almost comically misguided. Not everyone measures success by the same metrics, Aaron. He shook his head. This isn't about metrics. It's about reality. You're 31 years old with no real career trajectory, no significant achievements. Meridian's associate director program would still consider you, you know. I could make a call. The irony of his offer, made just hours before Nebula's acquisition, of Apex would send shockwaves through Meridian's executive offices, was almost too perfect. I appreciate the thought, I said carefully, but I'm very happy where I am. Are you? He pressed. Because from where everyone else is standing, you look lost. You missed a prime networking opportunity today to handle some minor issue at a company that's probably going to be obsolete in 5 years. I checked my watch, 3:15 p.m. I had a final briefing with the PR team at 4 to review the announcement protocols. I need to prepare for a call, I said, attempting to end the conversation. Another emergency? Aaron scoffed. What are you really doing, Sophia? Because this doesn't look like career dedication. It looks like avoidance. Something in his tone, the absolute certainty that he understood my life better than I did, finally broke through my careful composure. You know what, Aaron? Not every success has to look like yours. Not every career path follows the Kaplan family playbook. Some of us are building something different. Building what, exactly? He challenged. Because from where I'm standing, you haven't built anything significant in the 4 years since you walked away from Atlas. I was saved from responding by the appearance of my mother at the end of the hallway. Her expression, tight with disappointment, suggested I was in for another lecture about family obligations and squandered opportunities. Sophia, she said as she approached, her voice controlled in the way it always was when she was deeply displeased. I'd like a word. Aaron gave me a look that clearly said, "You're in for it now," before excusing himself, leaving me alone with our mother in the hallway. I've just spent 20 minutes apologizing to Elaine Harrington Smythe for your absence, she began without preamble. Do you have any idea how that reflects on this family? I'm sorry, Mom. I had an unavoidable work situation. More important than connecting with one of the most influential families in international finance? She shook her head in disbelief. Bradford specifically asked to meet you after hearing about your Wharton background. These are the kinds of introductions that change career trajectories, Sophia. My career trajectory is exactly where I want it to be, I said firmly. She studied me with a mixture of frustration and genuine confusion. How can you possibly say that? You're working at some obscure company with no prestige, no significant compensation package, no clear advancement opportunities. Your brother was on the executive track by your age. Yes, I've been thoroughly briefed on Aaron's many accomplishments, I said, unable to keep a hint of dryness from my tone. Don't take that attitude, she admonished. Aaron has worked hard to get where he is. He understood the value of the opportunities your father and I provided. The connections, the introductions, the guidance. I appreciate everything you and Dad did, I said sincerely, but I needed to find my own path. And where has this path led you? She asked. You disappear from family functions for mysterious work calls. You miss important networking opportunities. You seem increasingly detached from the values this family has always stood for. What values are those exactly? I asked quietly. Success, Sophia. Excellence. Achievement. Making something of yourself that reflects well on the Kaplan name. I studied my mother carefully. Her perfect posture, her impeccable attire, her absolute conviction that she knew what was best for me. Despite everything, I knew her concern came from a place of love, however misguided. I have made something of myself, Mom, I said. It just doesn't look the way you expected it to. She sighed heavily. Your father and I have been patient. We've given you space to experiment, but at some point you need to get serious about your future. I checked my watch again, 3:30 p.m. The PR briefing was in 30 minutes, and I still needed to review the final announcement materials. I'm serious about my future, I assured her. More than you know, but right now, I need to prepare for another call. We can continue this conversation later. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Sophia, she said, exasperation evident in her voice. What kind of company has emergencies every few hours on a weekend? It's not normal. It's a critical time for us, I said truthfully. It's always a critical time, she countered. That's the excuse you've been using for years to avoid confronting the reality of your situation. I took a deep breath. Mom, I promise we'll talk more about this tomorrow, but right now I really do need to prepare for this call. She studied me for a long moment before nodding reluctantly. Fine. But your father and I expect you at dinner tonight. No more mysterious disappearances or work emergencies. The family tribute to your grandfather is scheduled for dessert, and everyone needs to be present. I hesitated. The tribute was scheduled for 8 p.m., a full hour after the Apex announcement would go public. By then, financial news alerts would be lighting up phones around the table, including Aaron's. The timing couldn't be worse. I'll do my best, I said carefully. Not your best, Sophia. Your presence, non-negotiable. With that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking purposefully on the marble flooring. I made my way to my room and closed the door behind me, leaning against it for a moment as I collected my thoughts. The day had been a series of confrontations, each highlighting the vast disconnect between my family's perception of my life and the reality I'd been building. In secret, my laptop chimed with an incoming video call request from Harper. I sat at the desk by the window and accepted the call, shifting instantly into CEO mode. Ms. Kaplan, Harper greeted me, her tone professional but with an undercurrent of excitement. The team is ready for the final briefing. Put them through. I directed. My screen filled with the faces of Nebula's executive leadership team, 8 senior executives I'd personally recruited from top firms over the past 4 years. Each represented the best in their field, drawn to Nebula by our innovative approach and the opportunity to reshape an industry. Good afternoon, everyone, I began. In less than 4 hours, we take Nebula Dynamics public in the most significant way possible. The Apex acquisition will immediately position us as a major player in the financial services sector while reinforcing our core logistics technology advantages. For the next 30 minutes, we reviewed the announcement protocol, media response, strategy, and market reaction contingencies. Our chief communications officer confirmed that embargoed press releases had been distributed to key financial publications, set to go live exactly at 7 p.m. The reaction will be immediate and intense, she predicted. Nebula has deliberately maintained a low profile until now, which means there will be significant interest in you personally, Ms. Kaplan. We've prepared a biography and background materials, but you should expect direct inquiries from major outlets. I nodded. I'm prepared for that. Meridian Capital's response team will be working overtime, our chief strategy officer added. Our analysis suggests they'll attempt to downplay the impact on their Asia strategy, but the markets won't be fooled. Their stock will take a significant hit in after-hours trading. I thought of Aaron, who had tied his professional identity so completely to Meridian's success. Make sure our public statements focus on our growth, not their challenges, I reiterated. This isn't about undermining competitors. It's about building something transformative. As the call concluded, my chief financial officer remained on the line. Sophia, he said, dropping the formality now that we were speaking one-on-one. Are you ready for this? Once we make this announcement, everything changes, for the company and for you personally. I glanced out the window toward the lake, where family members were gathering for pre-dinner drinks on the main terrace. After 4 years of operating in the shadows, of being underestimated and dismissed, the thought of finally being seen clearly was both liberating and terrifying. "I'm ready," I said with conviction. "It's time for Nebula to step into the light." After ending the call, I changed into a simple black dress and checked my appearance in the mirror. In a few hours, this outfit would likely appear in financial news coverage as the first public images of the previously unknown CEO behind one of the year's most significant acquisitions. I wanted to look like myself, polished but understated, confident but approachable. My phone chimed with a text from Diana. "Where are you? The pre-dinner inquisition is in full swing." I smiled and texted back. "On my way. Save me a drink." It was 5:30 p.m. In 90 minutes, everything would change. But for now, I had one last evening of being the family disappointment to endure. The family had gathered on the main terrace for pre-dinner cocktails, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawns sloping down to Cedar Lake. I paused in the doorway, taking in the familiar scene, Uncle Richard holding court by the stone fireplace, Aunt Catherine inspecting the catering arrangements with barely concealed criticism, my father deep in conversation with Aaron about something that had them both frowning at Aaron's phone. Diana spotted me first, detaching herself from a conversation with Eliza to bring me a glass of white wine. "Reinforcements," she murmured, handing me the drink. "You're going to need it. Aunt Rebecca has been giving hourly updates on your shocking absence from the Harrington Smythe brunch." "Hourly?" I asked, taking a grateful sip, with increasing embellishments. "By the most recent telling, you intentionally snubbed an entire dynasty of British nobility." She grinned. Bradford's facial expressions during his mother's effusive praise suggested he might have been the one person relieved by your absence. I laughed despite the tension I felt. It was nearly 6 p.m., just 1 hour before the announcement that would transform my relationship with everyone on this terrace. My phone was set to silent, but vibrated in my clutch with incoming messages. Final. Confirmations from the executive team, no doubt. "There she is," my mother called, spotting me from across the terrace. "Sophia, come say hello to your cousins. They were just asking about you." I made my way through the gathering, exchanging greetings and deflecting questions about my absence. That afternoon, most relatives accepted my vague explanation of work commitments with polite disinterest, further evidence of how little they thought of my career. My father intercepted me as I moved toward the bar for a water refill. "A word," he said quietly, guiding me toward a relatively private corner of the terrace. His expression was serious, his posture rigid with tension. Aaron just received some concerning information from his contacts at Meridian. There are rumors circulating about a major acquisition in the financial services sector, something involving Apex Financial. My pulse quickened. The news was leaking ahead of schedule. "Oh," I said, fighting to keep my expression neutral. "Apparently, some unknown entity is positioning to acquire controlling interest. The timing couldn't be worse for Meridian. They've built their entire Asian expansion strategy around a partnership with Apex." He shook his head in frustration. "Aaron's team has been working on this for months. If these rumors are true, it could seriously impact Meridian's market position." The concern in my father's voice was genuine, not just for Meridian as an institution, but for Aaron's career trajectory, which had always been my father's primary focus. For a moment, I considered warning him, giving him some preparation for what was about to happen. But years of strategic discipline held me back. "I'm sure Meridian has contingency plans," I offered instead. He frowned. "That's not how these things work, Sophia. Major strategic initiatives like this represent months, sometimes years of planning. You can't simply pivot on a moment's notice." He sighed. "This is exactly why connections in the industry are so crucial. If Aaron had heard about this earlier, through his network." I nodded, allowing him to believe I was absorbing another lesson about the value of the Kaplan approach to business. In reality, I was mentally reviewing the final announcement preparations, calculating the ripple effects that would soon spread from Nebula's public emergence. "I hope it works out," I said simply. My father studied me with a mixture of frustration and genuine concern. "You know, Sophia, it's not too late for you to reconsider your career path. Aaron mentioned the Associate Director program at Meridian. With your background and our family connections, exceptions could be made for the standard requirements." The irony of being offered an entry-level position at a company that would soon be reeling from my actions wasn't lost on me. "I appreciate the thought, Dad, but I'm committed to my current path." He shook his head slightly. "I just don't understand what you're doing with yourself. 4 years at this Nebula company, and what do you have to show for it? No title worth mentioning, no industry recognition, no—" "Gregory," my mother called. From across the terrace, "The caterers need you to approve the wine selection for dinner," my father sighed. "We'll continue this conversation later," he promised, squeezing my shoulder before walking away. I checked my watch discreetly. 6:30 p.m., 30 minutes until the announcement. I needed to be ready to monitor the immediate reaction, which meant finding a private spot away from the family gathering. Diana appeared at my side, a knowing look in her eyes. "You've been checking your watch every 3 minutes," she observed. "Hot date later?" "Something like that," I replied with a small smile. "Care to share what's really going on?" she pressed. "You've been radiating tension all day, and not just the usual family reunion variety." I hesitated, then made a decision. Of all the Kaplans, Diana was the one I trusted most. The one who had always seen beyond the family's narrow definition of success. "Meet me by the boathouse in 20 minutes, I said quietly. "There's something I want to show you." Her eyebrows rose in curiosity. Now I'm intrigued. "It's worth it, I promise." As Diana moved away to extricate herself from an approaching Aunt Catherine, I felt a hand on my elbow. Aaron, his expression tense. "We need to talk," he said, steering me toward the edge of the terrace. "Something's happening with Apex Financial, and it could be serious." I allowed him to guide me away from the main gathering, wondering how much information had already leaked. "What's going on?" "My team at Meridian just called an emergency meeting," he said, his voice low and urgent. "There are strong rumors that someone is making a play for Apex, a major acquisition announcement expected within hours." I kept my expression carefully neutral. "That sounds significant." "Significant?" He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a rare display of genuine stress. "It's potentially catastrophic. Meridian's entire Asia strategy hinges on our partnership with Apex. If someone else takes controlling interest—" He trailed off, the implications clear. "Who's behind it?" I asked, genuinely curious about how much information had leaked. "That's the strangest part," he said, frowning. "No, one seems to know. Initial reports mentioned a company called Nebula Dynamics, but that can't be right." "Why not?" I asked, my heart rate accelerating. "Because Nebula Dynamics is tiny, a logistics technology provider with no presence in financial services. They couldn't possibly have the capital or strategic position to acquire something like Apex." He shook his head dismissively. "It has to be misinformation, or perhaps they're a minor partner in a larger consortium." The absolute certainty in his voice, the complete dismissal of Nebula's capabilities, crystallized everything I'd been feeling throughout the reunion. For years, my family had underestimated me, dismissed my choices, and defined my worth by their limited understanding of success. In just 15 minutes, that perception would shatter. "What if it is Nebula?" I asked carefully. Aaron laughed, the sound short and dismissive. "Impossible. An acquisition of this scale requires billions in capital, established industry connections, and strategic market position. trust me, I know this space. Whatever Nebula is, it's not a serious player. In financial services. I checked my watch again. 6:45 p.m. 15 minutes until the announcement. I need to make a call, I said. Good luck with your emergency meeting. He frowned at my apparent lack of concern for his professional crisis. This is exactly what Dad and I were talking about, Sophia. You don't understand how the real business world works, the stakes, the strategic implications. This is why connections and mentorship are so crucial in building a serious career. For 4 years, I'd absorbed comments like this with practiced patience. But knowing what was about to happen, I couldn't resist a small hint. Maybe I understand more than you think, I said quietly. He raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. What's that supposed to mean? You might want to keep your phone handy around 7, I suggested. Just a feeling. Before he could press further, I excused myself, moving quickly through the house and out toward the lakefront. The boathouse stood at the end of a long wooden dock, its classic architecture reflecting in the still waters of Cedar Lake. Diana was already waiting, leaning against the railing with curious expectation in her eyes. Okay, I'm here for the mysterious revelation, she said as I approached. Please tell me you're secretly a spy or something equally dramatic. This family could use the excitement. I smiled, feeling a strange mixture of tension and relief at finally being able to share the truth with someone. Not a spy, but I do have something to show you. I opened my clutch and removed my phone, checking the time. 6:55 p.m. 5 minutes until the announcement. You brought me out here to show me your phone? Diana asked, confused. Not exactly, I said, opening my email app. I brought you here because in about 5 minutes something significant is going to happen, and I wanted someone in the family to hear it from me first. Her expression shifted from amusement to genuine curiosity. What kind of something? The kind that changes. Everything. I took a deep breath. Diana, what's your impression of Nebula Dynamics? She looked surprised by the question. Your company? I don't know much about it. Some kind of tech firm, right? The family consensus seems to be that it's a small operation without much future, but I've always suspected there's more to the story. There is, I confirmed. Much more. Her eyes narrowed with sudden understanding. You're not just working there, are you? I held her gaze steadily. I founded it. 4 years ago, after leaving Atlas. I'm the CEO. Diana's eyes widened. CEO? You founded... She shook her head in disbelief. But the way everyone talks about it, like it's some obscure little startup. That was by design, I explained. We've operated deliberately under the radar, working through subsidiaries and white-label partnerships. It was a strategic decision to maintain a low profile while we built our technology and market position. And the company is successful? She asked carefully. I smiled. Current valuation, $2.3 billion, over 5,000 employees across 4 continents, and in exactly, I checked my watch, 2 minutes, we're announcing our acquisition of Apex Financial in a deal worth $4.8 billion. Diana stared at me in stunned silence, processing the information. Apex Financial? Isn't that the company Aaron's been talking about? The one central to Meridian's Asia strategy? I nodded. The very same. Holy shit, Sophia, she breathed. You're about to blindside the entire family, aren't you? Not intentionally, I clarified. This acquisition makes perfect strategic sense for Nebula. The fact that it impacts Meridian is incidental, though I won't pretend I'm not aware of the implications. Diana leaned against the boathouse railing, shaking her head in amazement. All these years, while they've been treating you like the family disappointment, you've been building a multi-billion-dollar company in secret? Not exactly in secret, I corrected. Just quietly. My phone vibrated in my hand. An alert from Harper. Announcement released. Media alerts going live. Now? I turned the screen toward Diana so she could see. It's official. She took the phone, reading the first lines of the press release with wide eyes. Nebula Dynamics acquires Apex Financial in $4.8 billion deal strategic acquisition positions logistics technology innovator as major player in financial services sector. CEO Sophia Kaplan announces transformative expansion. CEO Sophia Kaplan, Diana repeated, looking up at me with newfound understanding. Those mysterious work calls during the reunion. Board approvals, legal reviews, media, strategy, I confirmed. The final preparations for an announcement of this magnitude require the CEO's direct involvement. And all those times they've been condescending about your little job. I was managing a global company with thousands of employees and billions in assets, I finished. Diana handed my phone back, a slow smile spreading across her face. This is incredible. Absolutely incredible. She laughed suddenly. God, I wish I could see their faces when they find out. As if on cue, my phone began lighting up with incoming calls and messages. The first was from Aaron, followed immediately by my father. Then a succession of financial news outlets requesting interviews and statements. I think we're about to, I said, showing her the screen. From the main house, we could hear raised voices and movement. The peaceful pre-dinner atmosphere, suddenly disturbed. Someone, likely Aaron, had just received the news. Diana looked at me, equal parts impressed and concerned. Are you ready for this? 4 years of being underestimated, and now? Now they'll see me clearly for the first time, I finished. She squeezed my arm supportively. For what it's worth, I always knew you were destined for something extraordinary. I just didn't know what form it would take. My phone continued buzzing with incoming messages. I silenced it temporarily, taking a moment to prepare myself for what was coming. Thank you, I said to Diana, for being the one person in this family who never tried to reshape me into something I wasn't. Well, someone had to balance out all the expectations, she said with a smile. Then, more seriously, they're going to be shocked, Sophia, and probably hurt that you kept this from them for so long. I know, I acknowledged, but this wasn't about them. It was about building something on my own terms, without the weight of the Kaplan name or expectations. Diana nodded, understanding. And you did it. Brilliantly, from the sounds of it. In the distance, we could see figures moving rapidly on the main terrace. Family members gathering around what was likely Aaron's phone or laptop, absorbing the breaking news. Ready to face the music? Diana asked, nodding toward the house. Took a deep breath, straightening my shoulders and lifting my chin. Actually, I think it's time they faced me. Together, we began walking back toward the main house, where 4 years of careful planning and deliberate underestimation were about to culminate in a long overdue recognition of what I'd built while the world and my family weren't watching. Diana and I approached the main house, the sound of urgent voices growing louder with each step. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the great room, I could see family members clustered around Aaron, who was gesturing animatedly at his laptop screen. My father stood behind him, one hand gripping the back of Aaron's chair, his face locked, in an expression of stunned disbelief. Ready? Diana asked quietly as we reached the terrace doors. I nodded, more certain than I'd ever been. Ready. The conversation inside halted abruptly as we entered, all heads turning toward me. The silence that fell was absolute, a collective holding of breath as they processed what they were seeing. I was still the same Sophia who had endured years of their condescension, but suddenly they were seeing me through the lens of breaking financial news. Aaron was the first to speak, rising from his chair with an expression caught between confusion and accusation. What is this? He demanded, gesturing toward his laptop. Nebula Dynamics acquires Apex Financial. CEO Sophia Kaplan. What the hell is going on? I met his gaze steadily. Exactly what it says. Nebula Dynamics has acquired controlling interest in Apex Financial effective immediately. But that's... He struggled to reconcile the announcement with his understanding of my career. You're not the CEO of Nebula. You work there as some kind of operations manager. I never actually said that, I replied calmly. I founded Nebula Dynamics 4 years ago after leaving Atlas. I've been the CEO since day one. My mother stepped forward, her face pale with shock. That's not possible. A company making acquisitions of this size would be well known, established. We would have heard of it. Not necessarily, I explained. We've deliberately maintained a low profile, operating through subsidiaries and white-label partnerships while we built our technology and market position. It was a strategic decision. My father's expression had shifted from disbelief to something more complex, a mixture of confusion, suspicion, and the first flickers of reassessment. Are you saying that all this time, while we thought you were struggling in some entry-level position, you were actually running a company capable of a multi-billion-dollar acquisition? Yes, I said simply. That's absurd, Aaron interjected. The Apex deal is worth nearly $5 billion. Nebula would need significant capital backing, established credit lines, strategic partnerships, all of which we have, I confirmed. Our last private funding round valued Nebula at $2.3 billion. We employ over 5,000 people across 4 continents. Our logistics technology is already used by 17 Fortune 100 companies through white-label arrangements. Aunt Catherine exchanged bewildered glances with Uncle Richard. But you never said anything, she said accusingly. All these years when we asked about your career, I answered truthfully. I pointed out. I said I was with Nebula Dynamics. I never claimed to be struggling or in an entry-level position. Those were assumptions you all made. Assumptions you deliberately encouraged, my father said, his voice hardening. You let us believe you had walked away from a promising career for some minor tech job. You sat through family dinners listening to our concern and disappointment, knowing it was based on false information. I took a deep breath. I didn't correct your assumptions because I wanted to build Nebula on my own terms, without the Kaplan name or connections. I wanted to prove that success doesn't have to follow the path this family has always prescribed. So this was what? Aaron demanded. Some kind of elaborate revenge plot? You deliberately targeted Apex because of its connection to Meridian? Absolutely not, I said firmly. The Apex acquisition makes perfect strategic sense for Nebula. Their financial services platform complements our logistics technology in ways that will transform both industries. The fact that it impacts Meridian was not the driving factor in our decision. But you knew, he pressed. You knew what this would do to Meridian's Asia strategy, to my division, to my career. I met his gaze directly. I was aware of the competitive implications, yes. My mother sank into a nearby chair, shaking her head slowly. I don't understand. Why would you keep something like this from your family? From us? For the first time, I heard genuine hurt beneath her bewilderment, and it gave me pause. My secrecy had been driven by strategic necessity and a desire for independence, but I hadn't fully considered how it would feel to them when the truth finally emerged. It wasn't about keeping secrets, I said, softening my tone. It was about creating something on my own terms. From the moment I graduated from Wharton, this family had my life mapped out. The right firm, the right connections, the right career, trajectory. When I saw an opportunity that didn't fit that template, I knew I needed space to pursue it without having to constantly defend my choices. So, you just let us think you were failing? My father asked incredulously. I let you think I was choosing a different path, I corrected. The fact that you equated different with failing is exactly why I needed space to build Nebula without family interference. Uncle Richard, who had been uncharacteristically silent until now, leaned forward with sudden interest. 5,000 employees, you said. and valued at over $2 billion before this acquisition. His tone had shifted from dismissive to calculating in the span of seconds. That's quite remarkable, Sophia. I recognized the change immediately, the reassessment happening in real time as he recalibrated my position in the family hierarchy based on my newly revealed success. It was exactly what I had expected, yet it still felt surreal to witness. The Apex acquisition will position Nebula as a major player in both logistics technology and financial services, I confirmed. The synergies between our AI-driven supply, chain solutions, and Apex's financial platform create opportunities that neither company could achieve independently. My phone buzzed continuously in my hand. Incoming calls from journalists, analysts, and industry leaders all seeking comment on the breaking news. I glanced at the screen briefly, noting that several major financial news networks had already picked up the story. I need to take some of these calls, I said. The announcement is generating significant media interest. Of course it is, Aaron said, his voice tight with a mixture of shock and what might have been jealousy. You've just executed one of the most surprising acquisitions of the year, blindsiding the entire financial services sector, including your own brother's company. Aaron, my father warned, placing a hand on his shoulder. Let's not make this personal. Not personal? Aaron laughed incredulously. She deliberately kept us in the dark about running a multi-billion-dollar company while letting us believe she was struggling in some minor tech job. How was that not personal? Diana, who had remained quietly supportive by my side, stepped forward. Maybe she kept it private because she knew this is exactly how you'd react, making it about you instead of recognizing her achievement. Stay out of this, Diana, Aaron snapped. You don't understand what's at stake here. Actually, I understand perfectly, she replied coolly. Sophia built something extraordinary on her own terms, and instead of celebrating her success, you're angry that it might impact your carefully plotted career path. My mother rose suddenly, her social training reasserting itself even in the midst of shock. This is hardly the time or place for family disagreements. We have dinner waiting and guess we'll be wondering what's happening. Dinner? Aaron exclaimed. You expect us to just sit down to a family meal after this revelation? What would you prefer? I asked quietly. That I leave? That we all skip dinner to argue about choices I made 4 years ago? My father studied me with new eyes, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. No, he said slowly. I think we all need some time to process this information. But yes, we will have dinner as planned. The tribute to your grandfather is still scheduled, and he would expect the family to maintain appearances regardless of developments. My mother nodded firmly, professional hostess mode fully engaged. Exactly. We'll continue this discussion privately later. For now, we present a united front to the extended family and guests. A united front, Aaron repeated skeptically. While Meridian stock is probably already dropping in after hours trading due to my sister's surprise announcement. Aaron, my father said sharply, enough. Your mother is right. We deal with this as a family privately. The tension in the room remained palpable, but years of Kaplan family training in social propriety began to reassert itself. Aunt Catherine straightened her jewelry, Uncle Richard smoothed his jacket, and my mother checked her reflection in a nearby mirror, all preparing to return to the reunion as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. I need 10 minutes, I said, holding up my still buzzing phone. There are several calls I have to take before dinner. Of course, my mother said stiffly. We'll inform the staff to hold the first course. As the family began to disperse, rearranging, their expressions from shock to social pleasantry, my father lingered behind. Once we were alone, he turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Why? He asked simply. Why not tell us the truth from the beginning? I considered my answer carefully. Would you have supported my vision for Nebula if I'd explained it 4 years ago? Would you have accepted my decision to walk away from Atlas to found a startup with an unproven concept? He opened his mouth to object, then closed it again, honesty winning out over defensiveness. Probably not, he admitted. I would have seen it as unnecessarily risky when you had a clear path at Atlas. Exactly, I said. And I would have spent the last 4 years defending my choices at every family gathering, having my strategy questioned, being pressured to take the safer route. I needed to build Nebula without that weight. He was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. You could have trusted us, he said finally. Your mother and I only wanted what was best for you. What you thought was best, I corrected gently. Based on a very specific definition of success, I needed to find my own definition. He nodded slowly, a lifetime of certainty visibly recalibrating in real time. And you have, he acknowledged. Rather spectacularly, it seems. My phone buzzed again, Harper calling with what was undoubtedly critical information about the market's reaction to our announcement. I need to take this, I said apologetically. My father nodded. Go, handle your business. We'll see you at dinner. He paused at the door, looking back with what might have been the beginnings of respect. Congratulations, Sophia. Whatever else this revelation brings, what you've built is impressive. As he left, I answered Harper's call, shifting seamlessly back into CEO mode. Harper, what's our status? The announcement is generating massive coverage, Ms. Kaplan, she reported. CNBC, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, all running breaking. News alerts. Apex stock is up 22% in after-hours trading. And as expected, Meridian Capital is down 16% and falling. I glanced toward the door where my father had exited, thinking of Aaron and the conversation that surely awaited me after dinner. What about the internal reception? How are Apex employees responding? Initial feedback is positive, Harper confirmed. Your video message to their team was well received. The integration timeline we outlined has helped alleviate immediate concerns. Good, I said. Schedule a full executive briefing for 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'll be back in San Francisco by then. As I ended the call, Diana reappeared in the doorway. Communications crisis handled? She asked with a small smile. For now, I confirmed. The real work begins tomorrow. She studied me with undisguised admiration. You know, watching you shift between family mode and CEO mode is kind of amazing. It's like seeing the real you emerge from behind a mask. I considered this. Maybe. Or maybe they're both the real me, just different facets that I've kept separate. Until now. Well, dinner should be interesting, she observed. Aaron looks like he's swallowed something extremely unpleasant, and Aunt Catherine has already asked me 3 times if I knew about your secret company. The family dynamics have been completely upended in the span of 20 minutes. I smiled despite the tension I felt. Change was overdue, don't you think? Absolutely, Diana agreed, though I might have picked a less dramatic catalyst than a multi-billion-dollar acquisition announced during a family reunion. Go big or go home, I quipped, feeling a strange lightness despite the confrontations I knew still lay ahead. She laughed. Well, you definitely went big. And speaking of going home, I assume you'll be leaving early to handle the aftermath of this announcement. I nodded. First flight to San Francisco tomorrow morning. The next few days will be critical for the integration process. The CEO can't be expected to linger at family gatherings during such an important time, Diana noted with knowing humor. Suddenly, your early departures will be completely understood rather than criticized. She was right, of course. The very same behavior that had been deemed irresponsible and uncommitted would now be viewed as the necessary demands of an important executive position. The contradiction wasn't lost on me. Time to face the music, I said, gesturing toward the dining room where the family was gathering. Diana linked her arm through mine supportively. Just remember, you built a multi-billion-dollar company while they were underestimating you. Whatever happens at dinner, you've already won. As we walked toward the dining room, I felt a profound shift within myself, a final releasing of the need for family validation that had, despite my best efforts, lingered all these years. I had built Nebula Dynamics not to prove my worth to the Kaplans, but to create something meaningful on my own terms. Whether they ultimately celebrated my success or resented the manner of its revelation no longer mattered quite as much as it might have yesterday. The truth was finally out, and with it came the freedom to be fully myself. Not the disappointment they had perceived, nor the silent achiever I had become, but simply Sophia Kaplan, a woman who had found her own path to success. The Kaplan family dinner that evening unfolded like a masterclass in suppressed emotion. Crystal glasses clinked, silver utensils tapped against fine china, and conversation maintained a veneer of normality, while undercurrents of shock, resentment, and reassessment flowed beneath every interaction. I sat in my assigned place, now, seeming ironically prominent rather than peripheral, and fielded questions from extended family members who had hastily Googled Nebula Dynamics between cocktails and the first course. Supply chain logistics optimization through AI integration, Cousin William repeated slowly, as if testing unfamiliar words. And this intersects with financial services how, exactly? I explained the strategic synergies clearly, but without the deep technical details that would have been appropriate in a boardroom rather than a family dinner. Essentially, we're creating a seamless connection between physical supply chains and financial flows, reducing friction and increasing efficiency across both domains. Fascinating, Uncle Richard interjected, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by keen interest. And the market valuation implications are substantial, I imagine. We expect significant growth over the next 24 months, I confirmed, keeping my tone measured despite the nearly predatory gleam in my uncle's eye. I recognized it well, the look of someone recalculating my value as a connection rather than as a person. Across the table, Aaron maintained a rigid composure, his responses to table conversation clipped and minimal. Occasionally, he checked his phone beneath the table, no doubt monitoring Meridian's stock price in after-hours trading. Each glance was followed by a tightening of his jaw, telling me everything I needed to know about the market's reaction to our announcement. My mother, ever the consummate hostess, directed conversation with practiced skill, steering topics away from business whenever the atmosphere grew too tense. It was the same social choreography she had performed at Kaplan gatherings for decades. But now I detected something new in her manner when she addressed me. A subtle recalibration, an uncertainty about how to position me within the family hierarchy, now that my actual status had been revealed. "Sophia," Aunt Catherine called from further down the table, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. "I simply must know. How does one keep such an enormous enterprise secret for 4 entire years? Especially from family?" The question caused a momentary hush to fall over the nearby conversations. It was the question everyone wanted answered, framed with Catherine's characteristic blend of curiosity and accusation. I set down my fork carefully. It wasn't about secrecy, Aunt Catherine. It was about building something independently, without preconceptions or interference. Nebula operated through subsidiaries and behind white label agreements deliberately, for strategic reasons that had nothing to do with family dynamics. "But surely," she pressed, "at some point, as the company grew, you must have been tempted to share your success, to let your parents know." I glanced briefly at my mother and father, seated at opposite ends of the long table. Building a company from the ground up requires total focus. The right moment for disclosure never seemed to arrive. "Until today," Aaron noted, breaking his silence with an edge to his voice. "Quite a coincidence, announcing during the family reunion." "The timing was determined by market factors and regulatory approvals," I explained calmly. "The date was set months ago, long before the reunion was planned." "How fortunate that it aligned so perfectly," he replied, skepticism evident. Before I could respond, my father intervened. "I believe we agreed to discuss family matters privately, Aaron. This isn't the appropriate setting." Aaron subsided, though. The tension remained palpable. Diana caught my eye from across the table and gave me a subtle nod of support. As the dinner progressed through its carefully orchestrated courses, I observed the Kaplans adjusting to their new reality in real time. Relatives who had barely acknowledged me at previous gatherings now found reasons to engage me in conversation. Cousins who had never shown interest in my career suddenly had questions about Nebula's technology and growth strategy. Even Lawrence Bennett, my mother's would-be match from brunch, made a point of stopping by my chair to congratulate me on flying under the radar so effectively. It was exactly as I had expected, yet still surreal to witness. The family reorienting around success rather than the person who had achieved it. At precisely 8 o'clock, my father rose to begin the planned tribute to my grandfather, Nathaniel Kaplan, the patriarch who had established the family's fortune and position through his investment firm in the 1960s. As tradition dictated, he raised his glass and invited the family to do the same. "To Nathaniel Kaplan," he began, his voice strong and assured despite the evening's revelations, "who taught us that success comes from vision, discipline, and unwavering commitment to excellence. His legacy lives on not just in the firm he built, but in the values he instilled in each of us." The family murmured agreement, glasses raised. My father's gaze moved around the table, lingering briefly on Aaron before settling, unexpectedly, on me. "I believe he would be particularly proud tonight," my father continued, "to see how those values can express themselves in ways even he might not have anticipated. To innovation, to independence, and to redefining success on one's own terms. To the Kaplan legacy, evolving with each generation." The addition to his traditional toast was subtle but unmistakable. An olive branch extended across the divide that had formed when I walked away from the prescribed Kaplan path 4 years ago. I raised my glass in acknowledgement, meeting his gaze directly for perhaps the first time since I'd left Atlas Group. After dinner concluded, the family dispersed throughout the estate, smaller groups forming to dissect the evening's revelations, more freely than had been possible at the formal table. I stepped onto the eastern terrace, seeking a moment of quiet to check the messages that had been accumulating on my phone throughout dinner. 27 missed calls, 42 text messages, and over 60 emails, all related to the Apex announcement. The financial world was in full reaction mode, analysts speculating about Nebula's emergence from relative obscurity, business publications requesting interviews, and competitors scrambling to understand the implications for their market positions. Was scanning a particularly insightful analysis from the Wall Street Journal when Aaron found me. "Enjoying your moment of triumph?" he asked, his voice controlled but threaded with resentment. I lowered my phone. "That's not what this is, Aaron." "No?" He leaned against the terrace railing, his posture deliberately casual, though tension radiated from him. Meridian stock dropped 18% in after-hours trading. My division's strategy has been effectively gutted. And my sister, who allowed the entire family to believe she was struggling in some minor tech job, turns out to be the architect of it all. What would you call it? I chose my words carefully. I'd call it business. The acquisition makes strategic sense for Nebula and for Apex. That it impacts Meridian was not the primary motivation. But you knew it would, he pressed. You knew exactly what this would do to my position at Meridian. Yes, I acknowledged. I was aware of the competitive implications. He studied me with a mixture of anger and something that might have been reluctant respect. You sat through 4 years of family gatherings listening to us express concern about your career choices, offer you connections, suggest entry-level positions, while all along you were building the company that would ultimately undermine mine. I built Nebula because I saw an opportunity to create something transformative, I explained. not to prove a point or to undermine anyone. Yet here we are, he said flatly. I didn't argue. Instead, I offered what I had been considering throughout: dinner. Meridian's Asia strategy doesn't have to fail because of this acquisition. In fact, there could be opportunities for collaboration that would benefit both companies. He looked at me sharply. What are you suggesting? That once the dust settles, we explore potential partnerships. Nebula's technology combined with Meridian's market position in certain sectors could create value for both entities. Aaron's expression shifted from suspicion to cautious consideration. You're talking about a strategic alliance rather than pure competition. I nodded. I'm talking about finding the path that makes the most business sense, regardless of family dynamics. He was quiet for a moment, professional analysis temporarily overriding personal resentment. The board would need to be convinced of the strategic value. Of course, I agreed. I'm not suggesting special treatment, just a legitimate business conversation once the initial market reaction stabilizes. He studied me with newfound awareness. You've changed, Sophia. Or maybe I just never really saw you clearly. Probably both, I acknowledged. Before he could respond, my mother appeared, in the terrace doorway. There you are, she said, her voice carrying its usual controlled precision despite the evening's revelations. I've been looking everywhere. Aaron straightened, nodding to both of us. We'll continue this conversation later, he said, professional, mask firmly back in place as he excused himself. My mother watched him go, then turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Your father and I would like to speak with you. In the library, if you have a moment. I followed her through the quiet halls of the estate to the library where my father waited, standing by the fireplace that had been the backdrop for countless family photographs over the years. The setting seemed deliberately chosen, the room where serious Kaplan family matters had been discussed for generations. Sophia, my father began as I entered, your mother and I have been discussing today's revelations. I took a seat in one of the leather armchairs, maintaining my composure despite feeling oddly like a child called to account, despite being the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. I understand this is unexpected, I said carefully. Unexpected, my mother repeated, a hint of disbelief in her tone. Sophia, you built an entire company, a successful, significant company, while deliberately allowing us to believe you were struggling in some minor position. Unexpected doesn't begin to cover it. Why the deception? My father asked directly. That's what I can't understand. Why not tell us what you were building? I considered my answer carefully. It wasn't deception exactly. I never lied about where I worked or what I was doing. But I knew that if I explained my vision for Nebula at the beginning, you would have had very specific ideas about how I should proceed. We would have helped you, my mother insisted. Connected you with the right people, provided guidance. Exactly, I said gently. And Nebula would have become another Kaplan family enterprise, shaped by the same connections and approaches that built Meridian, and all the other traditional success stories this family celebrates. I needed to find my own path. My father was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. You didn't trust us to support your vision. I didn't trust myself to resist the pressure to conform to yours, I clarified. The Kaplan definition of success has always been very specific: prestigious firms, recognized names, traditional paths. I saw an opportunity that didn't fit that template, and I needed space to pursue it without constantly defending my choices. My mother sank into the chair opposite mine, her perfect posture momentarily abandoned. All these years we thought you were floundering, that you needed guidance. We worried about you. I know, I acknowledged. And I'm sorry for the concern I caused, but I'm not sorry for the path I chose. My father moved from the fireplace to the window overlooking the darkened lake, his back to us as he processed his thoughts. When he turned, his expression had shifted from confusion to something more complex. "What you've built is remarkable, Sophia," he said finally. "Not just the company itself, but the strategy behind it. Operating beneath the radar while establishing market position, revealing yourself only when the acquisition provided maximum impact." He shook his head slightly. "It's the kind of bold approach your grandfather would have appreciated, though he might not have admitted it publicly. It was perhaps the highest praise my father could offer, comparison to the patriarch, whose business acumen had established the family's position." "Thank you," I said simply. "I still wish you had trusted us with the truth," my mother added, "but I understand why you felt you couldn't." She straightened, regaining her composure. "What happens now? With the company? With your role?" "Now Nebula steps into the public eye," I explained. "The quiet phase of our growth is over. We'll be integrating Apex's operations, expanding our market presence, and likely pursuing a public offering within the next 18 months. My father nodded, processing the information with the shrewd assessment of someone who had spent decades in the financial world. "Ambitious timeline, but achievable given your foundation." "Will you be moving back to New York?" my mother asked, already thinking in practical terms. "The financial press will expect the CEO to have a presence there, especially after an acquisition of this magnitude." "We'll maintain offices in both San Francisco and New York," I explained, "but my primary residence will remain in California for now." The conversation continued, shifting gradually from the emotional aspects of my revelation to the practical realities of my position as a now public CEO. It was, in its way, a return to familiar ground, the Kaplans discussing business strategy and market positioning, though with me now occupying a very different role than they had ever anticipated. As the evening drew to a close, I excused myself to make final arrangements for my early departure the next morning. Diana found me in the guest suite, packing my belongings while fielding emails on my laptop. "So," she said, leaning against the doorframe, "CEO Kaplan emerges from the shadows. How does it feel?" I looked up from my packing with a small smile. "Surreal, honestly. 4 years of compartmentalizing my life, and suddenly the walls are down. For what it's worth, the family is in complete reorganization mode," she reported. "I've overheard 3 different conversations about how they always knew you had exceptional potential and were just waiting for you to find your path." She rolled her eyes. "The Kaplan talent for revisionist history remains undefeated." I laughed despite my exhaustion. I expected nothing less. Diana studied me thoughtfully. Was it worth it? The secrecy, the underestimation, the family drama, all to build Nebula.
"Your way?" I considered the question seriously. "Yes," I said finally. "Not because of today's revelation or the acquisition itself, but because of what Nebula has become. Something truly innovative that wouldn't have existed if I'd followed
the prescribed path." "Well, for what it's worth, I think what you did was incredible," Diana said sincerely. "Not just building the company, but having the courage to step away from everything this family defines as success to create something on your own terms. Thank ya." "You," I said, genuinely moved by her support. "That means more than you know." As Diana left, I moved to the balcony overlooking the lake one last time. The Oakridge Hills estate was quiet now, the drama of the day's revelations settling into new configurations of family dynamics that would continue to evolve long after I departed for San Francisco in the morning. My phone vibrated with a text from Harper. "Final press package distributed. Morning shows all requesting interviews. Private jet confirmed for 7 a.m. departure." I sent a quick acknowledgement, then paused to absorb the peaceful view. The moon reflected on Cedar Lake's still surface, creating a perfect mirror image of the night sky. After years of careful compartmentalization, of being underestimated and dismissed by the very people who claimed to want the best for me, there was a profound liberation in finally being seen clearly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, integration plans, media interviews, market reactions to manage. The quiet phase of Nebula's growth was over, replaced by the high-visibility position that came with disrupting an industry. But I was ready for it, perhaps more ready because of the journey that had brought me here. I had built something meaningful on my own terms, without the weight of the Kaplan name or expectations. That the family now recognized my achievement was satisfying, but no longer essential to my sense of self-worth or success. The next morning, as the sun rose over Cedar Lake, I slipped quietly from the estate and into the waiting car that would take me to the airport. Diana was the only one awake to see me off, giving me a fierce hug and extracting a promise to call once the initial media frenzy died down. As the car pulled away, I glanced back at the Oakridge Hills estate, the setting for so many Kaplan family. Gatherings where I had been the disappointment, the underachiever, the one who had strayed from the prescribed path to success. Now, as Nebula Dynamics stepped into the spotlight and I assumed my public role as its founder and CEO, that chapter was finally closing. The path I had chosen, against family expectations, against traditional wisdom, against the constant pressure to conform, had led to something greater than I could have achieved by following someone else's definition of success. I turned away from the estate and opened my laptop, ready to face the day ahead. The quiet architect of Nebula had become its public face, but the core of who I was remained unchanged. Someone who had learned that sometimes the greatest achievements come not from following established paths, but from having the courage to forge your own. And as for the family that had underestimated me for so long, they would adapt, as Kaplans always did, to the new reality. Some relationships would strengthen, others would recalibrate, and all would acknowledge, whether publicly or privately, that success comes in many forms, even those not immediately recognized by the Kaplan family metrics. That knowledge, more than any acquisition or market valuation, was perhaps the most valuable thing I had built over the past 4 years. Not just a company, but the unshakable confidence that comes from creating something meaningful on your own terms, regardless of who might be watching or what they might think along the way. The future stretched before me, bright with possibility, as Nebula Dynamics and I stepped together into the light. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.